Before I begin, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the committee and the judges for of the Michael Hartnett Festival for awarding me the Michael Hartnett Award 2020. I am absolutely delighted. I couldn't believe it when I heard it. And I am deeply honored, and I will try to read my poems as well as I can in this very strange and unusual situation. It is very courageous of the organizers to have this festival in a virtual fashion, and I am very much looking forward to all the readings. The first poem I'm going to read is a response to a call for poems from Janet McLean, who was the editor of a book called Lines of Vision. She asked Irish writers and poets to respond to the National Gallery exhibition, the standard National Gallery exhibition, to choose a painting to write about. Now, I had a kind of a special relationship to the National Gallery for a long time, because apart from the fact that I think it's an absolutely amazing, wonderful collection, and the first time I actually went there was in the 60s with my husband, who's from Dublin, and who was from Dublin, I should say. And I saw for the first time an ancestor of mine, strangely enough. The portrait of an ancestor of mine ended up in Dublin. He was the finance minister, so to speak, to the Duke of Bavaria. The family's gone down in status since, but never mind. But his portrait was painted by a member of the Danube School. The Danube School was a collection of painters in the 16th century. So the portrait is from 1526. But the way I did it was I just described walking through the gallery, and each section of the poem, it's in several sections, is about a different painting until I reach my ancestor, and then it walk away from the Anthony 100 pund. For a finance minister, it was a great name, £100. So this poem is called Gallery. Quiet, empty rooms. The parquet floor creaked only under my feet, and all the food on the tables, the knives, pewter plates, lobsters and hams, grapes overripe and bursting with sweetness, lay abandoned. Just the curling lemon peel still swayed a little. Tears of condensation ran down the overturned wine glasses. There was plenty for everyone in the universe of colour, a banquet for all the hungry, and time to eat it, more than enough. Wilted petals, insects, partridge feathers fell from the pages of my notebook, and hare's blood dripped through my hands. The girl standing among scrubbed vessels dreamed of something marvellous, something that approached her on tiptoe and placed a hand on her shoulder. A glint of light in the pupils of the man holding an orange blossom. His love note was being read by a woman in cold silks on the opposite wall. I had come to see my ancestor stand before the ghetto wall, anno 1526. His black velvet collar pulled up around his chin, he coughed into a blood-stained handkerchief. The wall remains, but who remembers him, his rank at court, his services to the Archduke? Pigeons muttered on the sills, and the archives of forgetting in the cellar rustled. All tried to escape from the frames. Children, men on horseback, kitchen maids. Even the snail by the angel's right foot, who crept the wrong way and missed the miracle. And the young mother wished she could step out of her niche, hand the baby across the sill to the custodian for just a minute, and shed the golden monstrosity that gave her headaches. Clouds on their way to a port, just out of sight. Rotterdam, perhaps. A fleet of sailboats adrift on the surface of morning, carrying the news we had long been waiting for. A pair of earrings, a drop of sun, windfall apples under trees, a village in the crook of a river's arm, all the round painted earth. I'll go on to read the next poem in the collection, Seeing Yellow, that got the prize. And this is in homage to my second home, or my first home, Galway. And it is a city that strikes me as somehow magical, and somehow how can I describe it? The ordinary is never quite ordinary, and the magical there becomes quite ordinary. It happens all the time. This is called Catch of the Day. At nightfall in the calm city, the crab fishers bring their catch, solemnly bedded on ice, to the restaurant where starred cooks with fast practiced hands wreath plates with dill and bay leaves as if for a funeral or a poetry prize. I am told that if you sit by the water in the old harbour with the seafarers and exiles from Genoa, Venice, Phoenicia, a sea otter might pay you a visit. Sleek robber, native of distant kelp forests, slowly padding up the stone steps out of the estuary's black, stinking sludge, his inquisitive demigod's face turning to peer in puzzlement at the alien upper world, where all is air and movement have little weight. Looking as if he had stepped out of some aquatic fairy tale, the water rolling off his grey pelt in silvered drops, his whiskers a bristle in the moonlight. If the moon nets him out at sea in its trembling mesh of beams, it will release him with the other species of misfits, those dreamers who drift in the water with their hands folded and their eyes on the stars. He will send them back into the dark depths. He will move on to find other fish to snare. And I want to read the title poem, which is Seeing Yellow. It was a time of anguish for us. We were informed that a friend of ours was in hospital and wasn't well. So we went on a rainy Dublin day, we went to see him in the hospital, and saw in Grafton Street, happened to see the buckets full of flowers, and decided to bring some sunflowers to him. Seeing Yellow. We brought sunflowers to the hospital, bought on impulse on the street where lilies, hydrangea, gerbera, Chinese lanterns flared in pails and buckets. September's extravaganza. But none could rival the fire of the sunflowers. We held them by their rough stalks like torches, afraid of getting our fingers burnt. Although the day was grey and wet, the streets and buildings, rain-darkened and cold, we walked in a gorse spring light all the way to the hospital, our hands and faces bathed in yellow. It had been mined at the core of the earth. The pure, primary pigment, of ripe lemons or of Van Gogh's wooden chair, or borrowed from the angel in Padua, the one we liked best, in the last row of the choir, skinny, eyes kohl-rimmed, deep in the shadow of a sombre song whose sketchy halo had slipped off and clanked to the floor. In the hospital, in crinkly plastic aprons and antiseptically washed, we placed the sunflowers in his hands, although we knew he couldn't keep them, hospital rules, and saw his face brighten. He was seated beside his bed as we approached, all frailness in flannel robe and slippers, in the discreet hush and clink of trolleys wheeling past, with meal trays and water bottles, quietly reciting a long-loved Catalan poem to himself, and tapping its meter on the arm of his chair with his fingers. "Sunflowers," he said, gladness and disbelief in his voice. Then after a pause, "I can see yellow." He put his hand round the flowers. He held them, the round black faces inside their yellow ruffs. "Soleil noir," he said. Rimbaud called them that, and again, with a laugh, "I can see yellow." We stood, looking at his fine old man's face, the rich white curls of his beard, his eyes humorous behind thick lenses. We saw him at the edge of a yellow field, the flowers swaying a little on tall green stems around him, their dark sun faces, their yellow light. I have a sequence of poems called My Brother Writes to Me. My brother Friede, who died in April. This is written before, a few years, 2 years before his death, when we were still having hope for him. And it was written because we corresponded all the time, Friede and myself. We wrote long emails to each other about all kinds of things. Among other things, he and I exchanged notes on the dwindling away of the bird population in Europe, on the dwindling away and the vanishing of swallows and even sparrows and starlings. And we were watching out for them everywhere. So every sighting we made, we exchanged. And this is the first poem in the sequence of 6. Since April, he's been counting swallows in the courtyard from his own perch on the top floor. I know he is sleepless with chemo, paces the rooms at night, holding tete-a-tetes, eye level with the moon in the skylight, waiting for morning. He writes, "The sky is smooth like a freshly ironed sheet, a boundless playground, ready for bold air surface winging it up there. He is tense with expectation. His ears are out for their telltale, shrill, exuberant calls, his eyes on the lookout for their swift calligraphy, faster than the fastest Chinese master's ink pen on a light blue page. But there are fewer every year," he says. His census of chimney swallows, house martins, swifts is dwindling. "Friede, will we soon go around heads down, afraid to look up and find nothing there? No summer sky songs, no speedy black nibs streaking the air." I'd like to finish with a poem called Before You Leave Letterfrack. Letterfrack is probably one of my favorite places in the world. The whole Renville Peninsula, it's just something about the place. And because you can't put it into words what it is, I try to write this poem. It isn't something that you put into your pocket like a souvenir, but it is something that'll stay with you. When we are talking about places where the soul can rest, this for me is the Renville Peninsula. Before you leave Letterfrack, remember the keepsakes. Collect a handful of light streaming through the clouds when the sea glints like black tinfoil just before a downpour. Bring back some smelling salts from Glassy-Lawn Beach, where the weather is made and the invisible has space enough to kneel in a storm. Also, a scrap of blue from the deep V of the sky between the diamond and the waterlogged hills, and cut me a specimen of reeds browned by the wind. Make your way to Tully and gather a scoop of the crimson gold of the hedgerows. If you catch a glimpse of the grey mare and her foal, hold on to that above all. And if the dragonfly of a two-seater is looping in the distance above the islands that day, trailing a feather of vapour, pack that feather for me. Cross the field to the abbey and climb to the top of the broken apse window, where 3 bald-headed monks sit and chant, tapping with their bare feet. Greet them politely. Bring me that chant. Thank you very much.